Although gravitrons are more gravity, let's play chess. So this is a game I finished just about a minute ago. Reasonably accurate in terms of game in 3 minutes per side. So let's take a look, see what happened during this game, and I'll guide through some of the main moves and decision points. I played the Scandinavian opening. I wanted to, and I did. So queen takes on d5, and white usually plays knight c3, which my opponent, my opponent did not, which is how we played, to develop the knight with tempo against the queen, who usually goes to a5, e5, or d8. I like d8. Do you think, well, then what does black get out of this whole, d4, d5 exchange? Queen out, then queen back. I mean, now white's ahead a move and a tempo, like I say, of initiative. It's almost as if things have gotten worse. We've given white more of an advantage off the start. Torch behind the evaluation bar seems to agree with about a half a pawn in white's favor. That's more than usual at the starting point. And here is 6/10 of a pawn in white's favor. So what does black get out of this? Mostly an open board. Like this, the chess board. I'll draw it like this. It doesn't matter really how you draw it, but there's been some central pawn liquidation. The c8 bishop has one great choice, two great choices, and in some cases, three great choices open to him as early as black's, whenever next would move. Even not on the turn where the queen had to run away to avoid being lost to the knight, but there's these moves are available. Straightforward development, knight to c6. Straightforward development, knight to f6. e5 can be played. It's a straightforward opening with some open space, and white has no clear plan. There's an advantage, yes, but there's no one clear way to just sweep black off the board here. All right. In addition, we've avoided some of the most aggressive openings that white might throw at black. We've avoided the fried liver attack. We've avoided King's Gambit. We've avoided the type of King's Gambit known as the Muzio Gambit. We've avoided the Danish Gambit. We've avoided the Danish Gambit and its further gambited version, where there's a bishop to c4 and then c3 takes b2, bishop takes b2. Right, so we've avoided some of the very most aggressive options that white has at her, or they disposal in many other ways to play the game. So that's one advert for the kings. That's one reason you would play the kings. What is the kings? One reason you would play the Scandinavian defense. I like this move by white. My opponent plays pawn to d4, wasting no time to stake out a claim in the center. That the bishop is going to be well developed is almost a fait accompli. It's hard to even move the bishop to a place where it won't be well placed. You wouldn't put him on h6, is what I'm trying to say. All four of these bishop moves are at least logical in most black responses. All right, so white's dark squared bishop is a superstar in the making. White's light squared bishop also count them, four really awesome logical ways to develop the white's light squared bishop. I'll put a highlight on both of them, and that one I would probably wait till the light squared bishop has been developed, but you don't have to necessarily. There's clear and straightforward development for the knight to go to f3 like usual, and even in some circumstances to go to e2, where he backs up the knight on c3. All right, they're like they replace each other, and it's a strong defensive formation. Should white pursue it, he or she or they will have no trouble castling kingside. c5. C5 might not have been the greatest move. My opponent pounced on it. I sometimes pounce. I play c5 in the Scandinavian defense with the queen to d8, where white has not played d4 yet. With this, let's go with the pawn back on d2. I shouldn't even draw that, but with the pawn back on d2, it's a good placement. Then you get your knight to c6, and there's all you're saying to white is, I don't think you got who gots. I don't think you got enough against me having the time to play pawn to c5 and scooching the knight in behind this pawn, contributing towards center control among other things. However, my opponent played d4, and for that reason, this gambit, as it was sort of a pawn sacrifice, was not all that good. I played for consistency of plan. Some call it continuation, not to be confused with good continuation. That is a Gestalt. That's an idea from Gestalt psychology. And for instance, if you see like dots, and it spells out more gravity, but there's spaces in between all the dots, but you can still, if you traced along, it would spell out poor gravity. That's, at some level, that's your brain doing good continuation to those dots. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm very not, and even the visual illusion doesn't always connect well with the therapeutic modality. Okay. But this is playing for consistency is really the language chess players would use more. You could consider a type of good continuation. Play pawn to e6. I'm against this pawn, right? I've been against that pawn since before I was born, because chess was invented with black versus white, and this pawn starts for white at d2, and all my pawns start on d7. So, but no, all jokes aside, I'm playing for consistency. I want to liquidate this pawn, and it's just one way to play. And then more just towards consistency. With a6, I'm preparing b5, booting the bishop back. Who knows? My opponent, if he doesn't prepare correctly and makes the move to b3, then I'll have this strong pawn chain ready to trap a full piece. My opponent was beyond that, and there's some sort of indication that this was otherwise not the best move. Probably what I'm thinking here, if I'm Torch, I'm thinking white wants to play bishop or pawn takes e6, and then pawn to b5 isn't even a concern. I mean, look, the attack that white has going at that point. You could trade your knight for these two pawns and have your bishop on b5 while also delivering check. It doesn't look good. So I think it's for that reason that Torch indicates a3 to be a mistake. b5, bishop's pushed back to a2, and then c4. We don't want this bishop to have any more say in the game than he has already had. Knight to f3. A good developing move. b7, applying more pressure to a pressured pawn. Part of the reason for pawn to c5 and then c4 was to remove from having any relevance on the board the light squared bishop, at least for the time being. And now I play bishop b7. Again, consistency. I'm against this pawn start to finish for some reason. But yeah, that's a white now black now has the go ahead for capturing, barring anything drastic. There's something drastic, a capture. I don't know if this was, so queen takes d1 was a great move. I didn't see it necessarily as a great or winning move at the time, but just logically we had to get the queens traded before e takes f7 check, and certain other options that black had. For instance, queen takes d8, king takes d8, E takes f7. My knight's got to get out of there just to survive. And yikes, we have an enemy pawn on the 7th rank. No, black can do better than that. So I traded queens on d1. Bit of a gutsy move. Bishop takes f3, also a mistake. I'm pretty sure torch will indicate f takes e6. Either gain back the material that I am behind. Let's take a look at that. A little bit of a practice first computer here. This is so that I need to learn here. I'm not going to be explaining as much as learning, but knowing me, my mouth will probably be moving the whole way along. So f takes e6. What do we think about this position? White's doing better. Yes, a little bit better. The eval bar has white at about a half a pawn ahead. On the other hand, this is not disaster. White can castle and should. It's not like king safety is really that much of an issue with the queens off the board. Well, you can castle and then the rook's closer to being connected, all this kind of stuff. Easy development. Yeah, okay, bishop b2 or bishop e3 looks really solid. But it's a minor piece middle game. So this is not the end of the world for black. And I'm definitely not going to be able to finish it out well against the computer on maximum. But we take a good look at this and say, aha, that's what would result. So instead of that, I played bishop takes f3. It's a bit of a mistake because pawn takes f7 check, king takes f7, then the recapture, and white's doing pretty well, having moved my king off of its spot, and this pawn that is so proudly part of this amazingly strong queenside pawn chain is now pinned to his king. So yeah, white has a bit of advantage here. On black side of the board, we have these horribly placed pawns on the f file. They're doubled. These are horribly doubled pawns. They don't help. What did I say? Black, I meant white. These two white pawns on the f file are just targets, really. And so if there's a pawn to be a target, I'm going to treat that pawn like a target. Bishop to c5, bearing down on f2. And we're going to target these two pawns and look for anything else that might come happily our way. Happily? I think that's actually correct. Sounds strange though. B3 is a great move here. B3 shows that white is available, and white is aware. See, my German-speaking side came out there, and I said white is avail, and I want white is aware because the Germans say W's as V's. But anyway, the pawn to b3 is an awesome and subtle move. Just one pawn forward, one square, right here in the middle of a crazy, a crazy queenless middle game, but with clear intent to dismantle this queenside pawn chain that black has erected and owns. I didn't want to be any part of that dismantling. I need to get my knight developed. I need to get my knight developed. Here comes some more great. I really like what white is doing here. Continuing with his plan. I have this rook to e8 move. Handy dandy. So that's good for me. And I think it's also, as Torch 4 agrees about all these moves, best move. Put the king in danger. Certain fixes are not ideal, like knight to e3 blocks this bishop. That would be a good way to pin the piece, but then probably castle that piece back to freedom. So, but it's not good because it blocks in the dark square bishop. Bishop really wants to go to b2, so maybe that's an option. that's making this not quite as bad. Or bishop e3 is not good because, like I said, bishop should go to b2. I don't know. There's some complexity. I'd say there's complexity built into to this to this part of the board. Knight e3 considered an excellent move. It's you don't usually want to pin your own piece, and sometimes you do. And it's one of those rules of thumbs that I kind of think I'm not always so sure about that. Sometimes you can really build a solid defense of your king by rallying by rallying the wagons, circling the wagons, by circling the wagons. This is a circling the wagons move. The knights aren't all that good on the first rank, so he's gonna go to he's gonna go to e3 or c3. All right, so might as well get him on his way while also blocking an enemy attack. Knight to d7 is just a quiet developing move. And here my opponent shows that he's been keeping track of his own tactical resources. C takes b5 check, king must move, and then capture another pawn, and my opponent's material lead is the main story out of all of this. He's got just a lot of extra pawns compared to me. These two pawns, my opponent's got pawns for days, my friends. Pawns for days. Although, I will say that both, like I said before, the F pawns are really badly doubled, and actually the A pawns are quite badly doubled as well. And if I recall correctly, that becomes a theme in the endgame later when I double rooks on the A file. Putting the pawn to use is pawn to f4. Yeah, no, it allows knight to f3, but without the loss of a pawn. It's complicated. It's a little bit complicated through here. I played knight to f3. I thought it just clarifies things a bit. I don't think my opponent's going to play king to e2 and then knight to d2 check. Doesn't then black pick up a pawn because this protecting knight is pinned. And not only that, but a tempo against the rook. Yeah, so I mean, pawn to f4. I would look for something a little more active, frankly, from white. And then, of course, the criticism comes without a rebuttal. King e2? Does that hold things together? King e2. There's no pawn that can eventually attack the knight on the e file, so we're not as worried about this pin as we once were. Plus, it's through his own piece at the moment. So king e2 might just about keep things together. That's right. I feel good. No, I'm proud that I caught that king e2 is a great saving move here. It's a little bit outside of the box. This is not a natural move. Breaking up your chance to going away with castle and kingside and keeping a pin. You may say, well, it's not pinned because the knight, but this knight goes here and then it's pinned. And not only that, he moves before the knight moves. Say this knight didn't move to g6. That's even worse because then you got a discovered attack. The knight gets gobbled up in the process. So yeah, the knight is close enough to being pinned that I really like this subtle defensive holding it together move for white. King to e2. Pawn f4. Knight f3 check, like we were talking about. This is complicated but promising for black, as black's pieces are just attacking better overall. The king moves. I like here just another improvement on how I play chess. This slower and preparing move. Rook to a6 is so very flexible. Rook takes a6. So very flexible. For one, it captures a pawn. For two, we're moving pieces that we might bully on the other a pawn. Not only that, but we could take time to play rook e to a8 and have doubled rooks on the a file, or rook a to e6 and have doubled rooks on the e file. It's an extremely flexible move. It doesn't really inhibit any other part of black's position, while it also, gains a pawn, not to be laughed at in gaining materials in that way. So then bishop c4 is an active move, and it forces a response from black's a6 rook. I kept thinking I wanted to put the rook on e6, but noticing that that's just not good. I'll be losing the exchange. So I said, well, let's do the next best thing. Rook to d6. A little bit of a joke embedded there. That's not usually in chess. That doesn't, just because the moves were next to each other doesn't really make d6 the next best move. If you caught that, good for you. Rook to d6 is an awesome move too, claiming as much open file territory as these two rooks can while still being active in the center. And then, so the pressure mounts, and then as pressure mounts, the mistakes follow soon thereafter. Bishop b2, we might be pressured to play knight to d2 check right away, but the more accurate move is to remove the defender of the c4 bishop first. The recapture is, it's listed here as an inaccuracy, but what else is going to be all that great? So there's a recapture and then the fork. Knight to d2 check, forks king and undefended bishop, and then it's enough material. Now material's even. A little bit of game left to go here. I made a mistake. Rook to b6. The problem with rook to b6 is bishop takes f6. And I don't have to ditch the rook right away though. And I play g takes f6, rook takes b6, knight takes b6. And it's a game. It's close at that point. But what did we play? Opponent played accurately. And then maybe rook to a1 just made it look like it was a smooth transition, but really black introduced some danger onto the board against his own benefit. In this position with black to move, take a second. What do you think? Don't look at the output. Okay, 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1. Of course. Knight takes b2, right? That's got to be the answer. That's got to be one of the answers. No, it's not even all that good. Rook d2 check, getting aggressive. All right. Hey, failed his own quiz. Another thing done. Rook to d2. There's no strong move in response for white. Maybe king to f3. And we'll probably capture on c2. And the knight's at least protected on a light square. Black's rooks are strong. So that's that. Let's try this. 8.2. So we'll try this out against the computer in practice. Rook d2 check, provided by Torch 4. Okay. No. We go back. We go back. Yeah. Let's go to here. Try this again. Okay. And I'm on board again. Okay. Okay. Interesting. I've been making notes of. Let me get this into analysis, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we just saw. Uh, in the game, how the game itself ended was a key part of the how the game actually ended was knight takes e3. That the knight is protected there allows for knight takes c2, and that's going to win black the exchange. In addition to pawn and pawn, black is going to win the exchange one way or another here, right? Because no, that's not true. What did we see? We saw pawn to a4, and I captured the rook. But now, how about rook to b1? Here, rook to b1. My opponent made a mistake, but it's coded as an excellent move. I don't know. Whatever. For right now, rook to b1 looks like it might have sort of saved the day for the time being. We'll open another string of practice, and hopefully this won't be. I won't belabor this point to go back to the other one that I already said I would. This is still strong for black, just not quite as strong as if in the game with the push. Pawn to a4. I would really consider that to be something on the order of a mistake. Anyway, it is what it is. And black gains the exchange, and with an extra rook, is just going to double down on the a pawn. That white can only defend once, and his king is way out of range to protect for a second level of protection against the a5 pawn. And the rook falls, and the game sort of collapsed. We had this game with this analysis that I wanted to go over, and we start somewhere around where we were just a second ago. Let me put this into a review, and that's going to be it for tonight's lesson. When we go through what I did with the end game, there's one particular point I want to make, and then I'll be signing off. Okay. So even with all that computer versus hint, well, I don't know if I really used hints, but go to where we were. Okay, so here we're just using pieces to their maximum capacity. Rook takes e3. This knight is so just barely unassailable. There's no pawns that can get him. The bishop's on a dark square. The rook's blocked, and so he's keeping both rooks solidly protected. King moves, and a lot of this is just eating up free material and making equal trades. Well, it's right around here where I wanted to show after the exchange of rooks. Okay, here. What to do? You've just settled this into a one game really, one position, one game, similar. You've just settled this, right? Rook and king versus rook, king, knight, and two pawns. Come on, this has to be a one game for black. What to do? What to do? Let's sort of think about if you were on the chessboard almost. I don't want, if I'm the black king, I don't want to be checked while I'm trying to move my pawns towards forward towards motion. So I place my king. I place my rook on g2. I want to block checks. That's what I thought best. And noting that I could always bring the rook back to g4 or g5, and that rook will then be protected by one of my other pieces. It's like a movable feast. If that's isn't that from a Shakespeare play? This is like a movable fortress, right? In endgame, sometimes we talk about creating a fortress. I consider this, what I was able to do here to be a movable fortress. I think I'm not great at this, but I thought I did well here, so I'm gonna dabble even further into the land of confidence. I did do well here. This is a technical thing. I should be able to make this win, but against best play by computer, it's not always easy. Excuse me, it's not always easy. King moves, we just show flexibility with rook to g5, and then we start pushing the h pawn. It's unopposed, so why not? And we want to look, can the h pawn move again to a square that is safe? Right now with black's move, no, it cannot. h4 loses the pawn, and things could go really poorly from there. Let's not let that happen. So I just play what piece of mine can cover h4 next. I noticed that the knight and h4 are at this relationship where there's a single square in between them, and that means usually this knight is a world away from being able to protect on h4. Same thing works as if this rook was here, this knight is a world away from being able to attack or capture on h4. It's just the way that the piece movement works out, that these guys are like in different realms or something. So I said, well, then it's got to be, and the pawn can't move, so we've got to protect it with some other advance. I played rook g4. Rook back to h1. Like we said, we're going to protect h4 so as to advance to h4, so then h4. King moves away. It's a bit strange. There's just maybe not all that many other moves that are good for white. But for right now, for this purpose, we'll play with what we were given. With king to e3, we play king to g5. And we spot the blunder. I mean, this is listed as an inaccuracy, but it's an inaccuracy out of nowhere and for not the greatest reason. This is some kind of non-best move, right? We're just gonna trade rooks. Rook g3 check. White's got nothing better than to trade, and then now we have not one but two pawns that are going to be free enough to promote. So, I don't know. I was glad I had that fortress moving well for a while, and it's like once in a while, the harder you try, the luckier you get. All right, I'm trying hard in these end games, so I end up getting a little lucky there. And that's it. Really, from here, this is more just basic technique. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.